morning coffee. Oh, yeah, okay. And slightly better what journey do we have for you tomorrow, for you and for us too. Tomorrow, so just be here and
I just want to make sure that we
with good mood. I'll be happy. So I think that's
sorry everyone, just one moment.
no problem.
Should we click here, the sound? You want
Yes,
me to-
please.
Okay,
That's what I
fine.
was trying to do. There we go. Now you can hear. Back to full screen. Visual, sorry.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Catarina.
Thank you. Well, good morning. I don't know if you can listen. Yeah, the sound is okay. Thank you for your presence and for the presence also of all the ones online. Okay, is it better? Thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking the organization, of course, of this conference for their kind invitation to be here, but also for your presence. The word presence would seem impossible just a few months ago, right? And unfortunately, it's still impossible for so many of us who were not able to be here, but are present in another way. And I thank them as well for that. My communication is entitled Design Culture Reshaped. And this pandemic frame is more of a pandemic frame of mind, also a literal frame that has to do with the many screens, of course, that we were forced to deal with through these past 2 years, but also a cultural frame that is related to design, specifically to design. So what well, at least part of my research focuses on the relationship between design, citizenship, and education. And this pandemic reinforced for me the need to educate not only for design and through design, but also about design. And that's indeed what all this design culture is all about, this expression is about. And some of the authors that use it and have written about it and researched about it, authors like Victor Margolin and Al Foster and Guy Jouyet and Ben Eimer, they don't see these. They don't see it in the same way. They coincide at least in two things. In the importance of having a design culture, and also that we don't have one. And I also agree with them, particularly in a country like Portugal, which still lacks the institutions who could help us to get there. Because when we talk about a design culture, it's not only something that's academically granted And when we talk about education connected to this design culture, it's not only something that makes sense in academic institutions, it must make sense in a broader way, in a societal way, and to get there, to get to a point that everybody really understands what design, what the word design means, truly means, and not what it should be, but what it actually is, what it should do, or what it actually does, to get to that point, to a point where this concept that deals with our material and immaterial dimension, the material and immaterial dimension of our culture truly gets recognition for what it means, and instead of being the source of so much ambiguity, that will be the point when we will at least begin to have this design culture. I hope by the end this will be a little bit, I don't know, at least clearer. During the pandemic, there was a recurrent narrative of we would listen many times that it would reshape our lives, it would change the way and reshape the way we work, and that's why I chose that word, and that's why I questioned it. It would change the way we live, it would eventually change our future. Nothing would ever be the same. We would never be the same. And maybe so, but I would, in everything that is human, I would leave the maybe, maybe so. Of course, many things have changed, and not all of them were negative, because some things, at least connected to the way we work, for instance, in education, were groundbreaking. We were not used to, many of us, to use technology the way we use it today, with so much easiness. And at first, the first couple of months, some of my colleagues and I were fearful and intimidated, and that's not the reality today. And the way we deal with our students now, and the way we incorporate technology and these visual technologies and these visual tools in our classes, that's probably something we would like to keep doing after the pandemic. So that's something that has changed. And I would say that's for the better, right? But I remembered, I don't know if you are familiar with an author called Kevin Robbins. He wrote many years ago, maybe more than a decade ago, a book called Into the Image. And one of the chapters was titled The Fear of the Unknown. And the premise was that we were moving all our modernity, in a way, was a project to distance ourselves from the world, and our relationship with technology was part of that modernity project to invest in the visible, in visuality, precisely what in human has more to do with distance. That would be, the project would be to invest in distance and disinvest in touch and in proximity, because proximity would have everything to do with chaos, with disorder, with touch, and therefore with the possibility of everything that touch brings to our lives, including disease, death, and of course the possibility of being attacked, the possibility of not being in control. So in the way Robbins talks, distance would be a way to control. And I kept thinking about that work, not necessarily because I see it today the same way I saw it 10 years ago, because now I've read other things, and including some things that I find more interesting, that tell us that images also touch us, so we are not immune from them. So that all that theory that told us that through image and through distance we would be protected would be, well, it would be through the ground, because they wouldn't make sense like that. We are indeed touched by images, not in a physical way, but we are not the same before them and after them. And in that regard, they indeed touch us. And at the same time, our machines are now different as well. And that's a question of design, because now we have tools that are more interactive. We interact with images in a way that we didn't before. We don't have a disconnection with images the way we used to have. We don't merely observe, we are users, right? But not only that, we truly, sometimes we are immersed in them, in these new realities, and we are affected by these images, and many times we are lost in these images. If in one way we use them to communicate who we are, we also are used by them to lose ourselves. We become others, as in the same way that others also are reinforced as others in these fields of image. So at first I had titled my communication "Othering by Design." I changed it because othering has many connotations, and I will talk about that concept. But the way I was using the concept was precisely like this, like something that's not only in the way I will talk about it afterwards, but in this sense that in the field of image, we indeed reinforce others as others, but we also become other versions of ourselves. We also reinforce ourselves as others we also become another and not just we or me. I become something else. And sometimes by choice, by design, and sometimes not. So these introductions, this long introduction, which tells me that 30 minutes will not be enough. It's because talking in another language and thinking in another language, it slows me completely, because in my classes I talk so fast. It's the opposite. So I'm so sorry, but it's better to move forward. I wanted, this introduction was mainly to try to explain why in a conference about image, I chose to talk about design. I don't, and I can't separate design from image, and I can't separate a design culture from a visual culture. Mainly because nowadays, all the tools we have to manage information, visual culture in a way, are design tools. So some of the authors I've referred earlier, mainly Guy Joulier, for instance, when he talks about design culture, he gives prevalence to design culture when comparing it to a visual culture. I wouldn't go as far as that, but I think they are deeply connected. And I would start, I wanted to start with this quote by Dieter Rams, who is one of the great names of design. He says that and he said this in an interview, he was a designer for Brown, and he was one of the disenchanted of design, who very early on started to tell us about the perils of what we were doing with design. We were creating too much waste, too much that we didn't need, that we don't need, and this quote. We need to deal with our resources differently in terms of how we waste things. We have to move away from the throwaway habit. Things can't and must last longer. They must be designed so that they can be reused. That is the future of design. It's funny that today this makes so much sense, but 5 years ago, this was like talking, it was like giving an hippie talk to yuppies from the 80s, namely in classes when talking to my students of product design, for instance, or fashion design. Yet that's all fine and well, but when we finish this, we need to work, and some things will be demanded from us, so we can't have ideology, we can't have all those ideas. One thing is the environment, another thing is reality. Nowadays, we no longer separate those concepts, or at least less and less, and we can think them separately, right? And we don't do it. So when the pandemic came, it was a good opportunity to rethink the future of design and to see how design would react to the present, and not only to the idea of a future, but to the necessities of the present. And in that pandemic frame, of mind, the design response was, in the beginning at least, was great, because it was fast and it was very creative and it was very effective. From companies to studios to schools, everybody was working together, and the solutions were amazing, and they were shared in an open source environment, and it was really fantastic what we could achieve in the first few months. Also from the industry, the way many factories stopped their production and started to make face masks and PPE, and because in many countries in the first few months, these were things that were very scarce. I don't know if you remember, right? We didn't have tests and sanitizer, masks, particularly in countries like Italy or France, the countries that were worst at that point. So the fact was that many companies raised to the occasion, and it was really moving to see that reaction. But of course, when business is involved, nothing is ever only pretty amazing. There's the pretty amazing side, and then there's the rest. This is the pretty amazing side is the one we often see in the news, and the other side is the one that we don't see, or that we see just sporadically. For instance, from the fashion industry, we had at the same time the same companies giving millions and millions of dollars to help several causes, and stopping production in countries like Bangladesh and Cambodia and others. And all those people that worked for them, they don't have a plan B, they don't have unemployment. I don't know the words, I can't remember it. They don't receive any money when they get unemployed. I mean, if you tell them today, tomorrow you can't, there's no work, and we don't know when you'll be back, or if you'll be back. So that's catastrophic, because we are talking about millions of people, including at the time the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, because we were talking about an humanitarian crisis at these points, and he came and talked publicly about it, but it made no difference, and that has to be shocking, right? But here in Europe, in the West, we continued the narrative that fashion was saving the world and design was saving the world, because all we saw were the good deeds of the millions that were being given to the good causes. So one of the constant narratives that we had was that this was a global pandemic, and we were all in the same boat. No, we were not all in the same boat, right? And we were not all even in the same, we didn't all have the privilege to be isolated. We didn't all have Zoom. We didn't all, of course, that was not the good side of things, and it affected the mental health of millions of people as well. But for billions, the reality was other. It was unemployment, it was being on the streets, it was dying and not even being a number in the statistics because they were in communities so far away that those deaths were not even counted. So those bodies were not even seen. That is the other part of this pandemic. It's not only about this frame and what we were seeing about each other's lives, it's also about what remained invisible, what was not seen. So yes, we had many creative solutions and many great things were done, but we also had another side, right? So that's why I questioned the reshape. That's why I questioned the reset. And that's why I maybe ponder the repeat when I think about what we will do going forward. Maybe we will just be the same. I'm an optimistic, actually. I know it doesn't seem so, but I am. I mean, I don't like to live in illusion. And in fact, not only human is delightful, contradictory, if you want to say so, design is also very contradictory. It is at the same time a synonym of originality and difference, and also imitation and uniformization. Sometimes it's quotations and homage. Sometimes it's appropriation, and it's not always easy to know when we are doing cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation, because sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's not. It's due to its history. From the beginning, design wanted to be democratic, but also due to its history, it was always a symbol of elitism as well. It keeps this politically correct discourse, and at the same time, these completely incompatible behaviors, because we have this amazing capacity to compartmentalize. And so we can be in this conference and we can be talking about something that we truly believe, like sustainability, for instance, and then we go out and half an hour later we are doing something with our friends that is the exact opposite of what we were talking about earlier, and feeling deeply inside, and that does not make us hypocrites. It doesn't. It just there's something in our brains that doesn't connect one thing to the other. But some of us make the connection, but many of us don't. Much of design is about activism, but much more is about this void, this ideological void, and that is something that fascinates me. This capacity that fashion, for instance, but not only as not only fashion, design in general, has this ability to take something that meant that was ideologically full or filled, like punk, for instance, in the 70s, and in the 80s. It was completely countercultural and anti-capitalist. And today, punk is just a symbol of style, and it was appropriated by luxury brands that are the epitome of capitalism. So one thing and the other are in the diametrically opposed places of this spectrum, right? And it's done one too many times. It's really fascinating when studied. Also, design defends diversity, but also lives from the repetition of patterns. And it apparently includes, but it factually excludes as well, right? And because it is also factually inclusive, yes, but it also is factually exclusive. It does not include all of us, because many of us can't buy that chair or that dress, that vase, those things that we think that design is. And it is not only that, but we think it is. So because we think design is that, we feel excluded from that. And also because we think design is also dressing like the size of this microphone. We feel excluded if we have a bigger body, for instance, right? Because we are not included if we don't have the perfect body, the perfect skin, the perfect whatever, because perfection is an interesting invention. So design lives from this ambiguity in the contemporary discourse, because it has many definitions that go from the more purposeful and objective ones, let's say, like design is the resolution of problems, right? It gives a solution to a problem, and they go to the other side of the spectrum that says that, like Foster says, from genes to genes, everything is design. So everything is design, but so everyone is a designer, and then they say, no, everything is designed, but only some of us can be designers. So part of the ambiguity lays there. It's a closed space with big ambitions, let's say so. And it's gaining momentum in our culture, because we keep talking more and more and more about design. We see more people researching about design, not only from within design, the area, the field, but also from outside that field. So people are curious about it. And part of the indefinition of design comes from this disarticulation between the academic ambiguity and this common sense version of what design is or should be. What people, the majority of people think design is. So it's different because in academia, design is either something very connected to the industry, something very functional, or something very abstract. And to the common sense, design is often synonym to something very expensive, extravagant, exuberant, and in that sense, it would be also dispensable. It wouldn't be necessary. So in the academic discourse, even either concrete or abstract, it reinforces the necessity of design, and the common sense discourse reaffirms the opposite. So design are pretty things, but if we have to choose between our lives, the quality of our lives, and something in the design realm, so what we will discard is design, because that's not necessary. And this comes from that place, how design is perceived. And we could ask if that's an advantage or a limitation. I would say it's a limitation, because seeing design as something extraordinary is something that these designers have contributed to that. The history of design has contributed to that, because it only highlighted the big names, the big works, right? And so everything, it's so special and so extraordinary that we forgot normality. And in a way, it's as if normality is too banal and it's almost shameful. So the ones that do the normal design are the anonymous, and the ones that do the extraordinary are the big names, the ones that get to be known and pass to history. And that's how design is perceived. So those will be the pretty things, maybe the ugly things, but they are like the Scary Beautiful. It's an installation, but we accept it as design. We may not understand it or like it or relate to it, but we accept it as design. And that's this idea that design is only what's extravagant and eccentric and exuberant comes from this confusion between, in our culture, which is perhaps more obvious in Portuguese, it comes from this confusion between superficial and surface. So everything that deals with the surface would be superficial. And we classify design as superficial and therefore not necessary, right? And we forget that design is intrinsically human and made for humans, and therefore always an experience created by someone for someone, always an experience. And that's how it connects with our identity. That's how it translates our identity, either individual or collective identity. And that's why it's important to understand what design is. Design, it's not just, yet it deals with the surface, but it doesn't, it doesn't mean that because of that, it is superficial in the way that we say that something is not deep, like when we say something it's not is not complex, right? So we are taking complexity from design because we confuse, we mistake one thing for the other. And we forget that as an experience, design is in fact always this interface between people and between cultures and their identities. And sometimes, yes, it goes too far. And as an interface, it becomes obsessed. One of the things it is always obsessed is with innovation, and we can question if innovations. What's innovation? Innovation is it? Does it mean that we are always creating something new, or does it mean that we are always improving what already exists? Because brands keep convincing us that they are always creating something new, but we know that what they mostly do is improving what already exists, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's design, right? It's great when once in a lifetime there's novelty, that something new happens, something new occurs, but not everything is new. New takes time to happen. So most of the times what we have is this investment in the continuity of the form, not with breaking with it. And I had this project that takes something very classic, which is the Windsor Chair, and reimagines it. This is not something new. This is just a reimagination of something that already exists. But of course, we are pressured because design exists and the design industries exist at a global scale. So that's a constriction, and that comes with very strong demands, which often means quantity over quality. And that tends to privilege the extraordinary over normality. And we must ask ourselves, how did we learn to value what we value? What do we value, and why do we value that like that? This light switch was made by Achille Castiglioni, and he says it's one of his best projects because not because it's the most known, quite the opposite, but because it works really well. So the anonymity of the object and the fact that no one knows that the light switch is his doesn't bother him at all. What really fulfills him is that it really works. For instance, when we look at this coat hanger from Fukasawa, this was created like a limited series and was created for a gallery, and it's meant to provoke. But when we present these without an explanation and we say, this is a coat hanger and this is a design object, it's difficult for many people to accept this as a design object. It works, it fulfills its purpose, but we don't accept it as design. Why? First, because we think, I could do this. So why would I pay for it, right? So I could do that, but also because we have expectations, right? I think, okay, this is funny. I wouldn't buy it, but this is design because this is weird, and design is weird, design is awkward. So this this goes to, with the idea of what I think design should be. This does not, right? So Fukasawa and Jasper Morrison, they create a project called Supernormal, which was also an exhibition and a book dedicated to all those objects that become transparent because they are so normal that we don't think of them as design. And at the same time, without them, our lives wouldn't work, wouldn't function, right? Because they sustain our daily lives and they really contribute to our quality of life. And I think I have to finish, and I would finish with that idea. Yes, we don't accept this as design because it's too simple, simplistic. It's too simple, it's too basic, and it doesn't correspond. It does not correspond with the idea of with the general idea of what design should be. But the general idea of what design should be, that's the problem. Because design, what it should be, is a warranty that everybody has the right to have the best possible objects in their homes without having to pay much. We are often eluded with the idea that we are paying for the material. Often we are paying for the brand, right? We are paying for the name. The material comes afterwards, and the project, it doesn't have as much to do with that. So if we have a good project, then we can scale the materials with which we do that, we fabricate the object from that project, right? So I can do the same object with different kinds of materials from devices to different publics. Therefore, I don't have to only make designs be synonym of objects that cost 5,000 euros or 10 or whatever. Because and create the notion in people's minds that that's what design is. And to end, one of these days, I saw a video on YouTube. Someone was trying a coat and saying marvels about that coat because it was Dior, and it was saying, "This is great. I will pay this much, but it's because it's great material." And then the person goes and sees the etiquette, and it's polyester. So they were paying for the brand. So it was great polyester for 5. That's it. Sorry, I've exceeded my time.
Thank you, Catarina. Sorry, question. So, the questions, we will have a session of questions, not questions, conversation. We will do a conversation with Catarina downstairs in our garden. We will call it the garden conversation.